The first spring statement. The UK was the only major economy to make hundreds of tax and spending changes twice a year, and major international organisations and UK professional bodies alike have been pressing for change. In 2016, I took the decision to move to a single fiscal event in the autumn, giving greater certainty to families and businesses ahead of the new financial year and allowing more time for stakeholder and parliamentary engagement on potential fiscal changes. So today's statement will update the House on the economic and fiscal position, report progress on announcements made at the two budgets last year, and launch further consultations ahead of Budget 2018, as set out today in my written ministerial statement. I won't be producing a red book today, Mr. Speaker, but of course I can't speak for the right honourable gentleman opposite. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to report today to the House on a UK economy that has grown in every year since 2010. An economy which, under Conservative leadership, now has a manufacturing sector enjoying its longest unbroken run of growth for 50 years. An economy which has added 3 million jobs and seen every single region of the UK with higher employment and lower unemployment than in 2010, seen the wages of the lowest paid up by almost 7% above inflation since April 2015, and income inequality lower than at any time under the last Labour government. Solid progress towards building an economy that works for everyone. So, Mr. Speaker, I reject the party opposite's doom and gloom about the state of the nation. Every Wednesday, we have to listen to the Leader of the Opposition relentlessly talking Britain down. And every year since 2010, we've had to listen to the Right Honourable Member for Hayes and Harlington predict a recession, none of which have actually happened. So, Mr. Speaker, if there are any Eeyores in the chamber, they're over there. I, meanwhile, am at my most positively Tigger-like today as I contemplate a country which faces the future with unique strengths. Our language is the global language of business. Our legal system is the jurisdiction of choice for commerce. We host the world's most global city and its international finance and professional services capital. Our companies are in the vanguard of the technological revolution, while our world-class universities are delivering the breakthrough discoveries and inventions that are powering it. British culture and talent reaches huge audiences across the globe, and our tech sector is attracting skills and capital from the four corners of the earth, with a new tech business being founded somewhere in the UK every hour, producing world-class products, including apps like TransferWise, CityMapper, Matt Hancock. Mr. Speaker, today the OBR delivers its second report for the fiscal year 2017-18, and I thank Robert Choate and his team for their work. It forecasts more jobs, rising real wages, declining inflation, a falling deficit and a shrinking debt. The economy grew by 1.7% in 2017 compared to 1.5% forecast at the budget, and the OBR have revised up their forecast for 2018 from 1.4% to 1.5%. Forecast growth is then unchanged at 1.3% in 2019 and 20, before picking up to 1.4% in 21 and 1.5% in 22. That's the OBR's forecast, Mr. Speaker, but forecasts are there to be beaten. As a nation, we did it in 2017, and we should make it our business to do so again. Our remarkable jobs story is set to continue, with the OBR forecasting more jobs in every year of this Parliament and over 500,000 more people enjoying the security of a regular pay packet by 2022. I'm pleased to report that the OBR expect inflation which is currently above target at 3%, to fall back to target over the next 12 months, meaning that real wage growth is expected to be positive from the first quarter of 2018-19 and to increase steadily thereafter. Mr. Speaker, I reported in the autumn that borrowing was due to fall in every year of the forecast and debt to fall as a share of GDP from 2018-19. The OBR confirms this today and further revises down debt and borrowing in every year. Borrowing is now forecast to be £45.2 billion this year, £4.7 billion lower than forecast in November, and £108 billion lower than in 2010, which coincidentally, Mr. Speaker, is almost exactly the total cost of the additional spending pledges made by the party opposite since the general election in June last year. Mr. Speaker, it's taken them just 9 months to work up a plan to squander the fruits of 8 years' hard work by the British people. As a percentage of GDP, borrowing is forecast to be 2.2% in 17-18, falling to 1.8% in 18-19, 1.6% in 19-20, then 1.3%, 1.1%, and finally 0.9% in 22-23, meaning that in 18-19 we will run a small current surplus, borrowing only for capital investment. And we're forecast to meet our cyclically adjusted borrowing target in 2021 with £15.4 billion of headroom to spare, broadly as forecast at the budget. Mr. Speaker, the more favourable outlook for borrowing means the debt forecast is nearly 1% lower than in November, peaking at 85.6% of GDP in 17-18 and then falling to 85.5% in 18-19, then 85.1%, 82.1%, 78.3%, and finally 77.9% in 22-23. The first sustained fall in debt in 17 years. A turning point in this nation's recovery from the financial crisis of a decade ago. Light at the end of the tunnel. Another step on the road to rebuilding the public finances decimated by the party opposite. And, Mr. Speaker, one that they would again place at risk, because under the policies of the party opposite, our debt would not fall over the next 5 years. It would rise by over £350 billion to more than 100% of our GDP, undermining our recovery, threatening investment in British jobs, burdening the next generation and wasting billions and billions of pounds more on debt interest. So, Mr. Speaker, there is indeed light at the end of the tunnel, but we have got to make absolutely sure that it isn't the Shadow Chancellor's train hurtling out of control in the other direction towards Labour's next economic train wreck. Mr. Speaker, in autumn 2016, I changed the fiscal rules to give us more flexibility to adopt a balanced approach to repairing the public finances, reducing debt, not for some ideological reason, but to secure our economy, against future shocks. Because, Mr. Speaker, we on this side are not so naive as to think that we have abolished the economic cycle. Because we want to see taxpayers' money funding our schools and our hospitals not wasted on debt interest. And because we want to give the next generation a fair chance. But, Mr. Speaker, I do not agree with those who argue that every available penny must be used to reduce the deficit. And nor do I agree with the fiscal fantasists opposite who argue that every available penny should be spent immediately. We will continue to deliver a balanced approach, balancing debt reduction against the need for investment in Britain's future, support to hard-working families through lower taxes, and our commitment to our public services. Judge me by my record, Mr. Speaker. Judge me by my record. We'll see, Mr. Speaker, if they've done their homework. They might be surprised. Since Autumn Statement 2016, I have committed to £60 billion of new spending, shared between long-term investment in Britain's future and support for our public services, with almost £9 billion extra for our NHS and our social care system. £4 billion going into the NHS in 2018-19 alone. And as I promised at the autumn budget, more to come if, as I hope, management and unions reach an agreement on a pay modernisation deal for our nation's nurses and Agenda for Change staff, who have worked tirelessly since the autumn in very challenging circumstances to provide the NHS care that we all value so highly. £2.2 billion more on education and skills, and £31 billion going to fund infrastructure, R&D and housing through the National Productivity Investment Fund, taking public investment in our schools, hospitals and infrastructure in this Parliament to its highest sustained level in 40 years. And at the same time, Mr. Speaker, we've cut taxes for 31 million working people by raising the personal allowance again in line with our manifesto commitment, taking more than 4 million people out of tax altogether since 2010. Freezing fuel duty for an 8th successive year, taking the saving for a typical car driver to £850 compared to Labour's plans, and raising the national living wage to £7.83 from next month, giving the lowest paid in our society a well-deserved pay rise of over £2,000 for a full-time worker since 2015. Mr. Speaker, since becoming Chancellor, I have provided an extra £11 billion of funding for 2018-19 to help with short-term public spending pressures and to invest in Britain's future. In the longer term, I can confirm that at this year's budget, I will set an overall path for public spending for 2020 and beyond, with a detailed spending review to take place in 2019 to allocate funding between departments. That is how responsible people budget. First, you work out what you can afford, then you decide what your priorities are, and then you allocate between them. And if, in the autumn, the public finances continue to reflect the improvements that today's report hints at, then, in accordance with our balanced approach and using the flexibility provided by the fiscal rules, I would have capacity to enable further increases in public spending and investment in the years ahead, while continuing to drive value for money to ensure that not a single penny of precious taxpayers' money is wasted. A balanced approach, Mr. Speaker, getting our debt down, supporting our public services, investing in our nation's future, keeping taxes low, building a Britain fit for the future, and an economy that works for everyone. Mr. Speaker, there is much still to do. Since autumn 2016, we have set out our plan to back the enterprise and ambition of British business and the hard work of the British people. A plan to unleash our creators and our innovators, our inventors and our discoverers, to embrace the new technologies of the future and to deliver the skills we will need to benefit from them, to tackle our long-standing productivity challenges and to say more loudly than ever that our economy will remain open and outward-looking, confident to compete with the best in the world. We choose to champion those who create the jobs and the wealth on which our prosperity and our public services both depend, not to demonise them. The Shadow Chancellor, Mr. Speaker, is open about his ideological desire to undermine the market economy, which has driven an unparalleled increase in our living standards over the last 50 years. We on this side reject his approach outright. The market economy embraces talent and creates opportunity, provides jobs for millions and the tax revenues that underpin our public services. So we will go on supporting British businesses. We're reducing business rates by over £10 billion. and we committed at Autumn Budget 2017 to move to triennial revaluations from 2022. Today, I'm pleased to announce that we will bring forward the next business rates revaluation to 2021 and move to triennial reviews from that date. We will also launch a call for evidence to understand how best we can help the UK's least productive businesses to learn from and catch up with the most productive, and another on how we can eliminate the continuing scourge of late payments, a key ask from small business. Because, Mr. Speaker, we are the party of small business and the champions of the entrepreneur. Since the budget, we've made substantial progress in our negotiations with the European Union to deliver a Brexit that supports British jobs, businesses and prosperity. And, Mr. Speaker, I look forward, I don't know what the honourable gentleman does, but I look forward to another important step forward at the European Council next week. But we will continue to prepare for all eventualities. And today, my right honourable friend, the Chief Secretary, is publishing the departmental allocations of over £1.5 billion of Brexit preparation funding for 2018-19, which I announced at the autumn budget. Our modern industrial strategy sets out our plan to keep Britain at the forefront of new technologies, with the biggest increase in public R&D spending for 4 decades. Much of this new technology depends on high-speed broadband, and today I can make the first allocations of the £190 million local full fibre challenge fund announced at autumn budget and confirm £25 million for the first 5G test beds. As our economy changes, we must ensure people have the skills they need to seize the opportunities ahead. So we've committed over £500 million a year to T-levels, the most ambitious post-16 reforms in 70 years. And from next month, £50 million will be available to help employers prepare for the rollout of T-level work placements. Last week, the Education Secretary and I chaired the first meeting of the National Retraining Partnership between the Government, the TUC and the CBI. And I can reassure the House, Mr. Speaker, that there was no beer, no sandwiches, not even a canapé, but there was a clear and shared commitment to training to prepare the British people for a better future ahead. And next month, our £29 million Construction Skills Fund will open for bids to fund up to 20 construction skills villages around the country. We're committed as a government to delivering 3 million apprenticeship starts by 2020 with the support of business through the apprenticeship levy. But we recognise the challenges the new system presents to some small businesses looking to employ an apprentice. So I can announce today that my right honourable friend, the Education Secretary, will release up to £80 million of funding to support those small businesses in engaging an apprentice. We publish a consultation on improving the way the tax system supports self-funded training by employees and the self-employed, and because we currently understand more about the economic payback from investing in our infrastructure than we do about investing in our people, I have asked the ONS to work with us on developing a more sophisticated measure of human capital so that future investment can be better targeted. Mr. Speaker, we're undertaking the largest road building programme since the 1970s. As Transport Secretary, I gave the green light to fund the new bridge across the River Mersey in 2011, and I was delighted to see it open late last year. The largest infrastructure project in Europe, Crossrail, is due to open in just 9 months' time. We're making progress on our plans to deliver the Cambridge, Milton Keynes, Oxford corridor. We're devolving powers and budgets to elected mayors across the Northern Powerhouse and Midlands Engine. We're in negotiations for city deals with Stirling and Clackmannanshire, Tay Cities, Borderlands, North Wales, Mid Wales and Belfast. And today, we invite proposals from cities across England for the £840 million fund I announced at the budget to deliver on their local transport priorities as part of our plans to spread growth and opportunity to all parts of this United Kingdom. And at the heart of our plan for building an economy that works for everyone is our commitment to tackle the challenges in our housing market, with an investment programme of £44 billion to raise housing supply to 300,000 a year by the mid-2020s. And today I can update the House. We are working currently, my right honourable friend, the Housing Minister, is working currently with 44 authorities who have bid into the £4.1 billion Housing Infrastructure Fund to unlock homes in areas of high demand. We're concluding housing deals with ambitious authorities who've agreed to deliver above their local housing need. And I can announce today that we've just agreed a deal with the West Midlands, who have committed to deliver 215,000 homes by 2030-31, facilitated by a £100 million grant from the Land Remediation Fund. And my right honourable friend, the Housing Minister, will make further announcements over the next few days on the Housing Infrastructure Fund. We will more than double the size of the Housing Growth Partnership with Lloyds Banking Group to £220 million, providing additional finance for small builders. And London will receive an additional £1.7 billion to deliver a further 26,000 affordable homes, including homes for social rent, taking total affordable housing delivery in London to over 116,000 by the end of 21-22. Mr. Speaker, my right honourable friend, the member for West Dorset, has outlined his initial findings on the gap between planning permissions granted and housing completions in a letter which I have placed in the Library of the House, and I look forward to his full report at budget. And I'm delighted to inform the House that an estimated 60,000 first-time buyers have already benefited from the stamp duty relief that I announced at the autumn budget. And I remind the House that the party opposite voted against it. In the autumn, we published a paper on taxing large digital businesses in the global economy, and today we follow up with a publication that explores potential solutions. And I look forward to discussing this issue with G20 finance ministers in Buenos Aires at the weekend. We also publish a call for evidence on how online platforms can help their users to pay the right amount of tax, and we will consult on a new VAT collection mechanism for online sales to ensure that the VAT that consumers pay actually reaches the Treasury. And we'll call for evidence too on how to encourage cashless and digital payments while ensuring that cash remains available to those who need it. Mr. Speaker, this government is determined that our generation should leave the natural environment in a better state than we found it and improve the quality of the air that we breathe. So we will publish a call for evidence on whether the use of non-agricultural red diesel tax relief contributes to poor air quality in urban areas. And following our successful intervention to incentivise clean taxis, we'll help the great British white van driver go green with a consultation on reduced VED rates for the cleanest vans. And we'll follow up on the vital issue of plastic littering and the threat to our oceans with a call for evidence to support us in delivering on our vow to tackle this complex issue. It will look at the whole supply chain for single-use plastics, at alternative materials, reusable options and recycling opportunities. It will look at how the tax system can help drive the technological progress and behavioural change that we need, not as a way of raising revenue, but as a way of changing behaviour and encouraging innovation. We'll commit to investing to develop new greener products and processes, funded from the revenues that are raised. And as a down payment, Mr. Speaker, we'll award £20 million now from existing departmental budgets to businesses and universities to stimulate new thinking and rapid solutions in this area during the call for evidence. Mr. Speaker, we are delivering on our plan with a balanced approach, restoring the public finances, investing in our economy and our public services, raising productivity through our modern industrial strategy, building the homes our people need, tackling the environmental challenges that threaten our future, embracing technological change, seizing the opportunities ahead as we build our vision of a country that works for everyone, an economy where prosperity and opportunity are in reach of all, wherever they live, whatever their gender, colour, creed or background, where talent and hard work alone determine success, a beacon of enterprise and innovation, an outward-looking free trading nation, one that is confident that our best days lie ahead of us, a force for good in the world, Mr. Speaker, a country we can all be proud to pass on to our children, and I commend this statement to the House.
So the Chancellor's Exchequer not quite hitting his forecast, spoke for about 26 minutes. 15 to 20 minutes was promised. John McDonnell now, the Shadow Chancellor.
Well, I have to say to the Chancellor, his complacency today is astounding. We face, in every public service, a crisis on a scale we've never seen before. Hasn't he listened to the doctors, the nurses, the teachers, the police officers, the carers, and even his own councillors? They're telling him they can't wait for the next budget. They're telling him to act now. For 8 years, they've been ignored by this government, and today they've been ignored again. The Chancellor has proclaimed today that there's light at the end of the tunnel. This shows just how cut off from the real world he is. Last year, growth in our economy was among the lowest in the G7, the slowest since 2012. The OBR have just predicted we will scrape along the bottom for future years. Wages are lower now in real terms than they were in 2010, and they're still falling. According to the Resolution Foundation, the changes to benefits due to come in next month will leave 11 million families worse off. And you know, as always, the harshest cuts fall on the disabled people. The gap in productivity between this country and the rest of the G7 is almost the widest for a generation. UK industry is 20 to 30% less productive than in other major economies. And why? Well, in part, the reason is that investment by this government, in real terms, is nearly $18 billion below its 2010 level. And this is a government that cut R&D, research and development, funding by $1 billion in real terms. Business investment stagnated in the last quarter of 2017. And despite all the promises, the government continues to fail to address the regional imbalances in investment. London, again, will receive 5 times more transport investment than Yorkshire and Humberside and the North. This is a government on climate change. How dare they speak? This is a government that single-handedly destroyed the solar industry. 12,000 jobs lost as a result of subsidy cuts. The Chancellor talks about the fourth industrial revolution, but Britain has the lowest. The Chancellor talks about the fourth industrial revolution, but Britain has the lowest rate of industrial robot use in the OECD. The government has put $75 million into its artificial intelligence programme. That's less than a tenth of what the US is spending. The Chancellor has made great play this week. The Tory bully boys can shout all they want.
There'll be a full opportunity for people to contribute, but the right honourable gentleman must be heard. John McDonnell.
Mr. Speaker, they can shout all they want, they can make their snide remarks. People out there know the crisis in our community. The Chancellor's made great play this week of reaching a turning point in reducing the deficit and the debt. It's a bit rich coming from a party that's put $700 billion on the national debt over the last 8 years. And it's worth remembering, this is a party that promised us that the deficit would be eliminated completely by 2015, 2016. And bizarrely, his predecessor, now ensconced in the Evening Standard, or is it BlackRock or the Washington Speakers Bureau, whatever number of jobs he now has, his predecessor's been tweeting about achieving 3 years late a deficit target that he actually abandoned himself. The reality is that the Chancellor and his predecessor have not tackled the deficit. What they've done is they've shifted it onto the public services his colleagues are responsible for. He's shifted it onto the Secretary of State for Health and the shoulders of NHS managers and doctors and nurses throughout the country. NHS trusts will end this financial year $1 billion in deficit. Doctors and nurses are struggling, being asked to do more and more while there's 100,000 NHS posts going unfilled. Does the Chancellor really believe the NHS can wait another 8 months for the life-saving funds it needs? How many people have to die waiting in an ambulance before he acts? He's mentioned the pay offers to the NHS staff we're expecting shortly. That was forced upon him by the Labour Party and trade unions campaign against the pay cap. But let me say this to him. Taking away a day's holiday from those dedicated staff is mean-spirited. And I ask him now, will he drop this miserly act? The Chancellor has also shifted the deficit onto the Secretary of State for Education and head teachers, with the first per capita cut in schools funding since the 1990s. And today, the government is even trying to deprive 1 million children of a decent school dinner. So I'm asking the Chancellor, and I'm asking every Conservative MP, if there's...
Order. The House must calm down. There will be plenty of opportunity for questioning from members in all parts of the House. The right honourable gentleman must be heard. John McDonnell.
So I'm appealing to Tory MPs today, if they're serious about ending austerity, to vote with us this afternoon to give those children the free school meal they're entitled to. The Chancellor has shifted the deficit onto the Home Secretary and Justice Secretary. Crime is rising, yet he's cut the number of police officers by 21,500, the number of firefighters by 8,500, and our prisons and probation service are in dangerous crisis. In shifting the deficit onto the shoulders of the Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government, in reality, he's shifted this burden onto local councillors. Yes, Labour, Lib Dem and Conservative councillors alike. So I raise again the stark reality of what this means for the most vulnerable children in our society. There's been a 40% cut in early intervention to support families. The result is the highest number of children taken into care since the 1980s. Children's charities, not us, children's charities are saying this: this crisis could turn into a catastrophe without further funding. And also last year, 400 women seeking refuge were turned away because there were no places available for them in refuges. And there are now nearly 5,000 of our fellow citizens sleeping rough on our streets, more than double than it was in 2010. And tragically, one of our homeless citizens died only feet away from the entrance to Parliament. He's mentioned additional housing funding. He mentioned London. The additional housing funding announced for London today is not a new announcement. This is money already announced. Any new funding is welcome, but it's simply not enough, and it represents a cut in London's budgets compared with the money Labour allocated in 2010. There are 1 million vulnerable older people who have no access to the social care they need. Conservative councils are going bust. Many will be forced to hike up council tax. Councils are running out of reserves, as the National Audit Office explained to us. So I asked the Chancellor, will he listen to Conservative council leaders, like his own in Surrey, who said, and I quote, "We're facing the most difficult financial crisis in our history. The government cannot stand idly by while Rome burns." And I ask him, how many more children have to come into care? How many more councils have to go bust? How many more have to run out of reserves before he wakes up to this crisis and acts? Today's statement could have been a genuine turning point, but it is, depressingly, another missed opportunity. People know now that austerity was a political choice, not an economic necessity. The Conservatives chose to cut taxes for the super-rich, the corporations and the bankers, and it was paid for by the rest of us in society. They even cut the levy on bankers in last month's Finance Act. We were never all in this together, as they claimed, never. They cut investment at the very time when we should have been developing the skills and infrastructure needed to raise productivity and grasp, yes, the technological revolution with both hands. And when they had a responsibility to meet the challenge of Brexit, we have a Chancellor who this weekend admitted he hasn't even modelled the government's options. Today we have the indefensible spectacle of a Chancellor congratulating himself on marginally improved economic forecasts, while he refuses to lift a finger as councils go bust, the NHS and social care in crisis, school budgets are cut, homelessness has doubled and wages are falling. This isn't a government preparing our country for the future, it's a government setting us up to fail.
Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the right honourable gentleman supported the switch to a single fiscal event, and now he's complaining that I haven't delivered a mini-budget today. I'm not surprised that he cannot quite understand anybody passing up the opportunity to introduce some new taxes, because that's what a Labour government would be doing, not once a year, not twice a year, but every other week, Mr. Speaker. And he talks about Tory bully boys. I heard him referring to some of my honourable friends as Tory bully boys. Can I just remind the House, this is the man who still refuses to apologise. Refuses to apologise to my right honourable friend, the Work and Pensions Secretary. So I don't want to hear anything about bullying. I don't want to hear anything about bullying from the benches opposite. The public will draw its own conclusions. He knows his Lenin, of course. The task is to win power, and that's why we see from the honourable gentleman the smooth, reassuring mien of the bank manager. But every now and again, the mask slips, Mr. Speaker, and we get a glimpse of the sinister ideology that lies beneath, an ideology that would wreck our economy if he ever gets anywhere near the controls, threatening confiscation, dismissing property rights, undermining the cornerstones of our economy and the basis of our freedom and prosperity. He talks about political choices. Let me tell him, Mr. Speaker, the political choices we've made. We've closed the tax gap to one of the lowest in the developed world. We've raised £175 billion by 100 measures against tax evasion and avoidance. We're collecting 28% of all income tax from the richest 1% in our country, a higher percentage than in any year under Labour. He says real wages are falling. I've got good news for him. The OBR expects real wages to rise from Q1 2018, which, in case he hasn't worked it out, starts in 2 weeks' time. He talks about spending on the disabled. Well, I've got good news for him again. Spending on the disabled will be higher in every year of this Parliament. He talks about research and development to support our economy, and research and development spending is at record highs. And he reels out the same old bogus statistics on regional distribution. I think he's got the briefing from Russia today, Mr. Speaker. Let me just tell him this. The Infrastructure Authority has published figures which clearly show that the highest per capita spending on transport infrastructure investment is in the northwest region, Mr. Speaker, not, the last time I checked, one of the southern regions. All regions have benefited from the boom in employment. All regions will end this Parliament with lower unemployment and higher employment. He talks about £700 billion of increased national debt. Well, yes, Mr. Speaker, we have had to deal with the legacy of Labour's meltdown in 2009 because it didn't fix the roof while the sun was shining. Our historic function is to clean up Labour's mess, and my report today shows that we're doing it once again. He talks about funding for the NHS. I've put £9 billion into the NHS since autumn statement 2016. He talks about school budgets. School budgets are increasing in per capita, per pupil terms, in real terms. And on children's services, he must know that Department for Education research shows that spending on the most vulnerable children has increased by around £500 million in real terms since 2010. We've committed £1 billion to tackle rough sleeping and homelessness and made a manifesto pledge to eliminating rough sleeping by 2027 and halve it by 2022. Mr. Speaker, no one watching our exchanges today can be in any doubt that Britain faces a choice. We have a plan to get our economy growing. The Shadow Chancellor says it doesn't matter whether GDP grows or not. We have a plan to get people on the housing ladder, while the Shadow Chancellor doesn't want, quotes, to get bogged down in property rights. We have a plan to deal with our debts. The Shadow Chancellor wants to send debt soaring because he fantasises that he can borrow for free. So the choice is clear. Our vision of a dynamic, modern economy, or the party opposite's vision of an inward-looking, narrow-minded country. Because we have to win this argument, Mr. Speaker, because if we don't, it will be ordinary people, not the rich and the powerful, not the globally mobile, but ordinary people who will pay the price, as they always do, for Labour's failure.